Hello, 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 ladies and gentlemen. My name is Wahiga K. Muturi. Welcome to Let's Create Africa, where we talk about business innovation, governance, and the SDGs. Today, we have our very favorite energizer bunnies in Kenya. No pun intended, but all manner of fun might be intended at the same time. We have Andrew Amadi, the CEO of Kenya Renewable Energy Association, Kerea, and Geoffrey Kimiti, also in his own right, executive chairman of green energy solutions. Thank you so much for joining us, gentlemen. And for the people watching in, thank you very much for joining Let's Create Africa webinar once again. We are happy to have all of you here. And as usual, I would like to mention Statinev, the ecosystem enabler, innovation ecosystem enabler, who are our partners and who have been with us for a long time. KYR Africa, which is a civic and citizen education platform. Soko, which is an e-commerce platform. And the Future of Work, which is into creating job opportunities for people. Again, today we are talking about renewable energy in Africa. And we have Geoffrey Kimiti and Andrew Amadi joining me on this panel. Gentlemen, I would like you to introduce yourself, starting with where you come from and where you hail from, if it's allowed. I could start with any of you. Geoffrey, would you like to begin?
Well, my name is Geoffrey Kimiti, and I am just another guy from Kiambu, born and bred in the village, herding cows, working in the shambas, swimming in the river. So that's me. But I've been in the energy sector for now about 15 years, and looking at especially renewables and how especially they serve the off-grid communities. So I'm delighted to be here to discuss that, as well as other issues around energy access, whether it's grid connected, off-grid. I'm excited to be here and to just engage in a discussion that would be enlightening to all of us. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Andrew Amadi, we go to you.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Andrew Amadi, and I am what they call Born City. I was born in Mombasa, but I grew up in Nairobi, and my journey in energy actually started about 32 years ago when I was still in high school. My curiosity as to finding solutions or alternatives to petroleum. At that time, it was the Gulf War that had started and that increased the cost of petroleum. And so I was curious. I was in my final year in high school, and I wanted to do a science congress project about using what we have in plenty, which is grass, as an energy source. And in some full circle way, that is now the business that I'm doing. My business is producing energy from grass, which will be in production from maybe July this year. But I also been committed and fully working in renewable energy and energy efficiency for the last 16 years.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for that. So, why would your type of people, you gentlemen, why would you even consider getting into an industry that is green energy, with its dynamics, with its politics, with all the background that is into it? Why does a man like you, Andrew, who's born in town, in a city, choose to enter into such a scenario? Kimiti, rivers, ponds, and all those things that you swam in. Why would you still choose to enter into energy as your career? Anybody can go first.
Okay, I'll be alphabetical and use my A privilege. For me, somebody put it so well in a conference that we attended in Morocco about 3 weeks ago, and said, with some of these things, it's not you who chooses, it chooses you. And you find yourself in a moment in time when your interest and the interest of the sector, if you like, are aligned. When my purpose at least, that I specifically chose and said, this is what I want to do. This is where I'm interested in. This is where my curiosity is leading me to. This is where my talent, my abilities, my knowledge are putting me in. So it's almost like, yeah, I like to say it's not that I chose it because it was lucrative or because it was something that was there. It's that all along, this is where my heart has been.
Yeah. I think it's just as Amadi said. Yeah, some things just find you on your way. When I finished university, uh, I wanted to be a high flying, UN guy, going all over the world, great, good suits, nice perfumes, all these things. That was the naive perception of a guy uh, in his years in uni. So when I joined a charity called Christian Aid as a volunteer in my third year of university, that really helped me to see how important energy was in terms of transitioning us from, dirty, energy to clean energy. And I happen to have done advocacy there for more than 2.5 years. And what that exposed me to was international climate dialogues and, looking at international climate policy. Um, but the more I did advocacy, because I did it beyond Christian Aid, I realized that I wanted to be part of the solution more than part of the policy dialogue. So I wanted to be the doer, and I wanted to, make things happen on the ground. I realized that policy work is good, but it takes a long time to change, international policies, especially where you have more than 190 governments trying to come to terms and agree on something. So I felt I wanted to be part of driving the change from the ground up, and so that's how I started doing renewable energy, and more so I started doing renewable energy, uh, linking to poverty, linking to access to water, and irrigation, agriculture. And I've always believed that putting money in people's pockets is the most effective way of giving them choices about how they want to live their life, and them addressing issues that matters to them. So that's how I found myself in the renewable energy space. And since then, I haven't turned back. I am happy to, get the knowledge from the ground, share it with people who are in the policy arena, talk about how could this be scaled, how could this, be done and streamlined into our legal frameworks or other. But I have chosen to be, among the people who are doing stuff that people can then learn from. So I've always been at the front line of innovating around energy and energy solutions, um, throughout my most of my uh, life after university.
Brilliant, brilliant. And just picking up on that, and it's good you talked about money, Kimiti. Um, we have seen very crazy surge in electricity prices within the region, and also mostly actually within Kenya itself. A lot of blackouts also. But even before I get into that, the pricing issue that is electricity in Kenya. Tell us about Kenya Renewable Energy Association, Andrew.
Yeah, so the Kenya Renewable Energy Association is a business member organization. It's an umbrella body that advocates, promotes, and develops the renewable energy sector across the board, all types of renewable energy. KEREA, as it's commonly referred to, started from the technical committee at the Kenya Bureau of Standards that was developing solar PV standards in 2002. And from those meetings, it was seen that it's one thing to have standards, it's another thing enforcing those standards, and it's also another thing having a peer mechanism to be able to self-regulate and to be able to comply to a higher level of practicing or a higher level of practice that enables the sector to grow. So Korea, with its roots in solar, initially focused a lot on solar projects and development of standards, development of the regulations, and still involved. In fact, tomorrow we'll be having a meeting on the net metering regulations. And since 2019, Korea underwent some changes, and this was in line with the changes in the regulatory framework, whereby the Energy Act 2019 was passed, and this created a lot of need for professional organizations to be organized and to step up to the opportunities that were to be created or that have been created from the process of the energy policy and the Energy Act. And a lot of this has to do with also alignment with the Constitution and with the principle of public participation. So Korea did a strategic plan, and at the top of the list of the strategic plan was to have a fully fledged secretariat with the technical capacity to become a knowledge provider and to have a full-time CEO who can be able to engage on behalf of the industry with the various other practitioners, which include the investors, project developers, and most importantly, the consumers. So that is where we are, and that is what we are doing in the sector, creating the awareness both about the opportunities, but also providing a knowledge driven advocacy where we use facts, we use statistics, we use analytics to be able to make the case. And that's because energy is very linear. Energy is directly measurable, convertible into money. So, because of that, it does require it has a lot of technical nuance, but this also needs to be broken down into format, into a language that both the ordinary person can understand and also the policymaker, the investor, can also be able to say that, yes, this is actually something that is beneficial. So we walk the balance between the three interested, often conflicting parties. You have the consumer that wants always sees the cost to be high, wants it to be cheaper. You have the developer that sees, as they say, they sniff profit. They want to make some money. That's the developer and the financier. And you have the government that sits between the two and is often in a non-enviable role of, on the one hand, protecting the consumer, but on the other hand, also collecting revenue because energy is a major source of revenue for the government. So we balance these interests, and the approach that we use is, where is the win-win-win situation? Where does everybody win? And there are very specific, say, price points. There are very specific niches, and that's what we work towards. So that, in a nutshell, of course, it would take me a whole 2 hours to just break it down in terms of exactly how we are doing this, but that is what the Kenya Renewable Energy Association does and stands for.
Hello, Kimiti. Oh, we can't hear you. Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
much better.
Well, I have to say that, yeah, I believe that Andy is in a very good position to tackle the issue of the energy cost. But I happen to be in a position to sort of address that based on my experience developing off-grid systems. So I have a good understanding of some of the issues that as an energy developer you face. Because you have to understand that anything you do as a business has to, bring income You have to charge people costs that are cost reflective, otherwise you will close and go home. So part of the issues that are driving up the cost of energy are really related to cost for Kenya Power. Kenya Power has a lot of things it decides, but there are some that they don't really, decide unanimously, that we are going to do this. And I really don't envy them because they have had a very huge expansion. They are covering, I think now over 9 million customers. They have, I believe, almost 8 of those million people are consuming below 30 kilowatt hours per month. Now, from a developer's point of view, that is business that will not pay back. In fact, if we looked at their projections, I don't know, maybe to recover the cost of a connection, I don't know, it could take, many, many years. And I understand that's a concern, not just for them, but as well as their investors. One of the challenges they face is a challenge that the mini grid developers face. So you basically develop your energy systems, do your transmission and distribution, take power to people, but unfortunately they don't have capacity to consume that energy. And so they end up paying you bills that are $3, $4 a month equivalent. And that is really bad for business. So I believe that from my standpoint, the biggest challenge that they are facing, and one that unless it's addressed, what they have to do is, charge, expensive rates so that you pay more for what you consume, even if it's little, or they drive up demand for electricity. So we are working to bring some of the knowledge and experience we have from the off-grid sector to the grid by working on technology that helps to build demand for energy. So that's actually one of our focus areas, is to drive up demand for electricity. And we do actually have an existing partnership around that with Kenya Power. So we are hoping that whatever we do together, learn together, is something that could be employed in the long term to deal with demand generation issues. But that is something that is a big, huge problem. Apart from the other things that they face, even their dollar-denominated loan issues, the grid in terms of it requiring a lot of money to maintain and operate. So there are other costs, and I have to sympathize with them as much as I know that we are feeling the pain. You can imagine that the average customer of electricity in Europe or China will have an average of 50 to 150 appliances in the house. When you go to a typical rural home in Kenya, people do not have anything. They probably have this a small radio that uses batteries. Everything else can be done with a solar home system. So basically, the energy they are using is just for lighting the house and charging a phone. So it's a huge investment that has been done, and I appreciate what the government has done and Kenya Power to take connectivity out there. Then the burden on Kenya Power to make sure their business is gonna pay back is real. So I know that they're facing sincere challenges. And so, I sympathize with them. That being said and done, I know the regulator is also quite fair. So the Energy, Petroleum and Regulatory Authority is a great arbiter. My experience with EPRA has been that they try to be fair to everyone. So I do expect that whatever prices of energy they arrive at, this would be priced in a way that will not overburden Kenyans, but will not kill our energy services, because we do need that. It's an essential service, and it is something that we require to develop our economy and run our businesses.
Brilliant. Kimiti, in regard to what you've just mentioned, what does GIVE exactly do, GIVE Limited?
Well, so we have been in the solar off-grid space. So as an off-grid solar provider, so we do energy systems for rural communities. We are focused on productive use specifically, so we only target businesses. So ideally, we provide solar, rooftop solar for businesses in the rural areas, particularly particularly in Turkana, Kakuma, Kalobey. We've done quite a bit of productive use down at the coast as well. So that is our primary focus area. We do have some projects that we are doing that have solar home systems, but that is something we are phasing out strategically. So we are basically focused on productive use solar, but we also have an Internet of Things technology. So we are digitalizing what we call appliances and equipment. So basically, we have developed technology uh, to monitor equipment and energy beyond the meter. So we are beyond the meter. So the meter ends at your house, but what happens inside your house, what happens inside your business. So we are in that beyond the meter place with our Internet of Things. So we are trying to build the data and the tools for grid and off-grid companies to be able to have visibility of consumption, demand, usage, everything that happens beyond the meter. So that is part of the solution that we have built, and yeah, we have piloted that over the last 1 year or so. We are taking it to the market with a couple of people, including with the Kenya Power project this year. Yeah.
Okay, great. Amadi, just to come back to you. I know we are talking about green energy and renewable energy and all those things combined. But somebody is asking, how exactly does that apply to me as a normal citizen? How does that, they're nearly asking how does that affect cocoa growing in Ghana? But in the meantime, we're just talking about how does this affect me? Because what I'm bothered by is actually high price of electricity, is even making
Yeah.
sure that a mother who has milk in the fridge does not lose the milk they they actually were able to put in the fridge for their child, and things like those. Kindly explain to us how career comes in to such a conversation.
Yeah, so I think the short of it is that when it comes to energy, the cost is very relevant, but it goes back to what was just mentioned around the usage. So if we look at the case of Kenya Power, that you have got 8 million customers that are not using this product, then that ends up making it appear to be expensive. But also, it comes down to very fundamental things. And I'm talking here about material things that in order for you to get even water, fresh water, you need electricity. You need water for pumping, you need purification. We hardly have anywhere left where you can be able to access. Very few people will be able to access fresh water without it being pumped, without it being transported, without it being treated. All of this requires energy and more specifically electricity. As for the ordinary person, there's always the feeling that it's expensive. The cost of electricity is expensive, and that is sometimes a very uh, subjective, but it's also a very objective view that if, for example, in this scenario, and we need to, as much as I will sympathize, yes, with the situation that Kenya Power is in, but as a business, Kenya Power is first and foremost is a business, and then it's providing a service. But as a business, you have to be able to basically make a return on investment or make a profit. And the way to do that is the most fundamental principle is buy low, sell high. And unfortunately, if you're buying high, you're going to sell even higher. And because there is a legacy of it being a monopoly, a virtual, well, effectively a monopoly in terms of supply, in terms of not having options, then the historical approach has been to pass on that cost to the consumer. And a lot of what is being passed on is inefficiency. Just like what was said earlier, that a lot of the requirements that people who are connected in the last mile connectivity, a lot of them could have been done with solar home systems. In fact, even in our electricity connectivity, when we do the accounting, 25% of those who are connected to electricity are tier two. There are different tiers of connection to electricity. That means they have at least 4 hours of electricity supply every day, and that is coming from solar home systems. So, as a business, and this is where everyone in the sector is now looking, is that you cannot be able to grow the business without there being a benefit of using this electricity to the consumer. And that benefit, we're looking at it from a productive point of view. It could be productive from the point of view, for example, if you have a solar fridge and you have a solar freezer on your farm and you're growing tomatoes, your you have time, you can be able to store your harvest without it going bad in 4 to 5 days. If you have milk, you can store that milk, you can keep it at 9 degrees, extend the shelf life, and be able to get value, which translates to actual revenue from where people are actually throwing away food. Our post harvest losses, depending on the crop and on the area, are as high as 50 to 60%. And then on the other side, you have the market inefficiency where people do not have access to food. So, one fundamental knowledge that we got from doing the demand stimulation study, which we carried out towards the end of the last year and presented the report in January, is that no country has ever developed, increased their per capita GDP without electricity. And where we have seen anecdotally, there's a very strong correlation between the peak demand for electricity, which currently we are at 2,150 on the grid, plus to the per capita GDP. So when somebody is asking, how does this affect me? If you are consuming electricity and you're not using electricity to produce, then the net effect is that it's going to be expensive on you because you're not getting a return on investment in that energy. But in your interaction, there are some things that at a personal level, it is your comfort as well. That we are now going into, we are well into the climate change where the data every year, and it's at this particular time of the year that we are recording the highest ever temperatures. So very soon, and very soon is like next year, the year after, you will require mechanical cooling in order to get thermal comfort, which comes from electricity. So it is necessary if we want to have a certain standard of living, whether it is through economic activity or even just physical comfort that requires electricity. And that is why it's important. That is why we are looking at the options. And today, we have the biggest advantage in Africa because if you look at solar and the way that you assess the cost of solar is not the upfront cost. If you are to do the upfront cost, for example, that you buy a car and then you have to buy all the petroleum that you require for that car if you're doing, say, 40 kilometers a day for the next 20 years. How much would that be? It would be in the millions. But that's exactly what happens when you buy a solar panel. It will provide you that energy for the next coming period of time. So we look at that cost, that maybe this panel cost me 25,000 shillings. It's a steep cost, but it's going to generate for me electricity worth over 150,000 shillings in a period of 25 years. So that has its own return on investment, and you can quickly calculate what the cost is per month, per year, based on you paid once and you now get the benefit. So the issue of access becomes an issue of finance, that on the one hand, the tariffs are high, but you're paying those tariffs. On the other hand, the cost of the solution is also an upfront cost, but over time, you will be paying much less than you're currently paying. I did an estimation that even if I took a loan at 100% interest to be paid over 3 years, and then I have a facility whereby I just pay a monthly bill for the next 20 years on a solar system, it will still be 90% cheaper than what I am paying as a domestic consumer for grid electricity. To get exactly the same electricity, you're going to get your volts and your amperes exactly the same. So, those are the considerations, those are the opportunities that people need to be aware of when they hear the discussion on energy. And I can't end without saying that um, without the context of climate, there wouldn't be an urgency to transition or to start looking at the need for renewable energy. On the one hand, yes, there are benefits such as stability of price. You buy your solar panels today, that's it. That's the cost that you will have paid for the next 20 years. No fluctuations, no monthly adjustments, no external factor will change that. So that's also a big benefit. But when you look at it from climate and we say that the use of fossil fuels is detrimental, it's an existential problem, then we have to do something. On our part, in Africa, we are not responsible. So our response to the climate is our depravity, our food security, our healthcare, our transportation. How much of this could be better if we had that autonomy? So, energy then becomes more than just the question of the cost of it, but also the strategic value that it presents when you generate your own energy, when you have a control over the pricing, and when you are assured that you will be able to benefit from the services that the energy will provide for a long period of time. So that is how I see a lot of this conversation playing out.
Ah, thank you very much. Kimiti, now just bringing it to a level that I guess the citizens can understand. What, how exactly do you onboard into such an option? Number one. Number two, actually, let me start with what exactly is green energy and renewable energy, because that is even the fundamental question for most people. What is it even? What am I even trying to onboard? Then second, then you can answer how do I onboard onto such options? And then last but not least would be why is that the way to go? Because first, I didn't know there was an option apart from solar, and is that the only option for most households? And does that mean, is it even necessary for me actually to change? Yes.
All right. So ideally, what we are building in terms of solar for productive use is a service model. Anyway, let me answer the question of renewable first. So renewable energy is basically energy that is not depleted by the fact that the resource is not being depleted by the fact that you're using. So when you use the energy of the sun to generate power, it doesn't compromise your ability to get sunshine tomorrow. So that's a difference between burning a tree to get charcoal, because you may not have it tomorrow unless you are planting others, and they may not grow as rapidly as you want. So that non-depletive nature of it is very important. That's why hydro, solar, wind, and others are very good sources of energy in terms of the fact that the resource is not being depleted. And then, of course, there is the fact that the advantages. It's clean. It doesn't pollute. So it has other things that are basically quite good in terms of sustainability. Well, there is a bit of waste that is generated, but when you compare with fossils, definitely, then you can see the difference. Um, so and then one thing I'd like to tackle, because there's a very huge issue around cost of electricity, is I would like to very much highlight that solar and renewable energy goes a lot together with efficiency. So it's all about maximizing the value of the energy you get in terms of a resource and making sure your cost of energy stays as low as possible and you get the maximum value. So in the off-grid sector, people really think about efficiency. So you will find, they really go into analyzing what is the cheapest refrigerator that I could get to work with the smallest solar system I could design. And so people go into rigorous designs around, cost and efficiency. But on the grid, people don't really think about efficiency much. Just walk into a supermarket, grab a fridge, uh, and I go home. And that is why less than 1% of Kenyans cook with electricity, or 0% really, when you think about it. But while there are ways of cooking with electricity that are 5 to 7 times cheaper than charcoal and kerosene and firewood, but people think electricity is expensive. And that, in my view, there needs to be a huge conversation, even with users of Kenya Power's electricity around efficiency, both on the off-grid side and on the grid connected side. People need to really educate themselves as much as possible, research. I know, for example, EPRA has a rating that they put on refrigerators and other equipment in terms of whether how efficient they are, etc. I think people really need to pay attention to that. And I'm hoping we will get to a time where people can actually budget for their energy and actually be able, because they are smart meters, you can be able to prepay for your electricity, and then you know what your load is in your house, and you know whether you have efficient appliances in the house, and be able to say, okay, yeah, I'm staying within my energy budget. I think it's good, it works for me. So we need to move those conversations, because there are perceptions that it is expensive, but what if you had a more efficient way of doing what you're doing? And so then you address that. Would your cost of energy go up even if the tariff went up? So you have to be, thinking around efficiency quite a lot. That being said, so our solar model currently is offered mostly within, restricted geographical areas within the arid and semi-arid areas. That's because of the price is a bit expensive. It has a subsidy on it from a World Bank project. So, but it's an energy as a service model where a business, signs up for a connection, and we put the solar on their rooftop and put a meter, and they're paying for metered energy. They are not paying for the system. They are not paying to own the solar system. They're basically paying for energy that they are utilizing. So that's in a way that's restricted, but hopefully we will be able to offer that product sooner than later, maybe beginning 2025 outside that area. But for now, we are focused on some restricted geographies, in terms of building that business model.
Okay, great. Amadi, what are some of the biggest challenges facing the adoption of renewable energy in Africa, and how can they be addressed?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is that initial upfront cost, and how they can be addressed is exactly what Kimiti has talked about. That it's no longer a technical problem. It is now a financial problem. But I say that again depends on which side of the coin you look at it. Some call it problems, some call it opportunities. And in the private sector, that is definitely an opportunity. And the opportunity is exactly what Kimiti is saying. That's exactly the same conclusion that everybody has reached, starting from the pay-go. That's the system whereby this was a challenge we faced with kerosene. 10 years ago, we were having this discussion, and we were saying that kerosene is very expensive, and people cannot afford to buy a solar lantern. However, the solar lantern is 2,000 shillings, and people are spending 40 shillings a day on kerosene. So 50 days worth of kerosene can be able to buy a lantern. So using the innovation of mobile payments, it became possible to break down and being able to integrate a circuit that has a SIM card into a lantern or a solar home system made it financially feasible for somebody to spend the same amount and get better utility, because LED lighting is much brighter than kerosene lighting. Kerosene was the brightest thing in 1850 something. Today it's not. LED is much brighter, much better. There's more service utility. So where we are now is that we are at another, somebody used the word yesterday, precipice of development, where we have, at least in Kenya, we have tasted access. We have over 80% of the population. If you correlate it to mobile data connection to the internet on a regular basis, that is over 90%. You cannot connect to the internet without electricity. So they have some form access to electricity. So as we are getting to 100% access, we are now saying we need to be directing this energy towards economic development, towards growth. And that is where what Kimiti is doing, what we are also doing on our side, is looking at what are the productive applications and how can this same principle be applied for business, so that my vision, and I've said this several, is that every business in Africa that uses electricity during the day should have a rooftop solar panel. So when we look at it in that perspective, then also how we approach it becomes different, because this is not something that can be achieved by a single entity. Of course, there are going to be limitations. This will require collaboration on a massive scale. And I say, when you come from renewable energy, when you come from solar as a source of energy in Africa, you come from abundance. There's enough, more than enough. There's enough capacity with renewable energy in Africa to meet global energy demands. It's only a question of where are you pointing it. So when we look at it from that perspective, then we can say this kind of collaboration, because the sun doesn't have borders. It doesn't selectively shine on people, it shines on everybody. And in this energy transition dialogue, that's one of the things that we're saying, that our depravity, our lack, our inability to adapt to the impact of climate change, to rising temperatures, to floods that are occasional, to food security, requires electricity. We have the capability to use solar, and that is where our adaptation efforts need to be done. And in terms of speed of doing it, that's also another factor. As much as we talk about the SDGs and we're talking about by 2030, there are people today that require water urgently. And we have the technology, the finances could be available to deploy this in a coordinated fashion across the entire maybe 20 counties where people lack it. We've already got a report that the temperatures are rising in a number of the counties, and we require cooling as a matter of urgency. So some of the barriers, like we have so much tax on refrigeration, those need to be reduced or to be eliminated to provide access to cooling. That also provides the second line of defense in food security. So I think that what we need is collaboration. What we need is the investment is there, the pledges are there, the finances are there. We've talked to them. They've committed at least so far over $1 trillion, but they haven't deployed $1 billion or billions of dollars. Maybe there's a little bit that is trickling in, and Kenya is the beneficiary, mostly geothermal and wind projects. But for the rest of Africa, we are still at the stage where projects are being developed at such a small scale, which is very fine. That's a very good business model for small and medium enterprises, but they need to be put together collectively. And the collective parameters, metrics to use are standards, technical standards, ethical standards, in terms of how you're relating to the consumer, the quality of the products and the service that you're providing. These can be scaled up massively. We have examples of this. We have examples of M-Pesa as a business. It wasn't through setting up branches in each and every town, M-Pesa rolled out and allowed entrepreneurs to come in and to run a component of that business, to franchise. So we can be able to develop such models to accelerate and to be able to point this towards real. And I see the areas of benefit being in food security. We need food no matter what, water, transport, healthcare, and general economic development. Information requires electricity. We need data centers that are powered from renewable energy resources across the continent. All this is possible, all this is available, and it's, for me, just not happening fast enough. And I see this as a role that the private sector can take up. The private sector did it for telecommunication. Africa has access to telecommunications in less than 20 years. We are almost in every country, over 90%. We can do the same with not just access, but to production across the continent. That is the way.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Kimiti, even as we go into you, and thank you, Amadi, for actually aligning to the challenges of food security and how it can borrow within the aspect of renewable energy. Kimiti, how can governments, from your side of the table, how can governments and private sector organizations work together to accelerate the deployment of renewable energy solutions in Africa? Because it's actually a good point he's talked about, even knowing that World Bank has given money before, IMF has given money before, many institutions of trade, and even borrowing within the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement. Question is, how can governments and private sector organizations work together to accelerate the deployment of renewable energy solutions in Africa, starting with the release of funds? We can't hear you. Were you on mute? Sorry, sir. It's okay.
Yeah, is it get that? Yeah. So I do recognize that there's some effort that has been made by the government, for example, with the Kenya Off-Grid Access Project, that is trying to provide some subsidies around solar for the arid and semi-arid areas. But that being said, I think there is still a huge gap in terms of access to capital for local, especially local businesses that have a long-term view of being in this market, staying in this market, and growing their business for years. And so I think there is a need for that sort of capital, access to capital, to be enhanced, especially for local entrepreneurs. It's a huge challenge for people to get loans that can fund energy projects locally. Energy projects require very patient capital. They are long term. Your return is not going to come in a day or two, a year or two. You may need to wait for a while before you recoup your money. So how do you do that? Some subsidies could be considered, especially for mini grids, because the cost is very high of connection. And without subsidies, I'm afraid to say economic viability will be very, very difficult to realize. There's been some efforts to provide tax incentives, so solar is exempted from VAT at the moment, and that is helped the industry to grow, in fact, in Kenya quite a lot. Um, but I think more needs to be done in terms of getting access to to everybody. But so far, I think in terms of access to electricity in Kenya, we are not doing very badly. There are countries as well that are very far behind, but that investment comes at a cost. As I said, and Kenya Power is definitely feeling that investment cost at the moment. I think those are the two things I would say. So capital, the other thing that would be helpful is advancing the net metering, provisions, and making sure that that can be able to help people to build solar systems where they can sell excess capacity to the grid. So that could incentivize a lot of people to invest, in renewables more and more. So I think just increasing that kind of engagement could do a lot in terms of getting renewable energy there. But let me note that 90% of our electricity actually comes from renewable sources. So Kenya is a leader. Kenya is a good example, I think, among very many countries. Within the African continent, definitely there's a lot of gaps and markets that are very, sort of unreached and unserved. So I think there's also a need to try and, as private sector, look even outside Kenya. But yeah, that as far as I can go, I think local entrepreneurs will really need support to get the kind of capital that is needed to get the kind of projects that are required at scale. So for scale, that financing is a major issue for the local businesses. Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much. Amadi, even
Yeah.
as we prepare to let you go to another separate function, how can local communities be involved in the planning and implementation of renewable energy projects to ensure that they are both sustainable and socially equitable? And that's also coming from, I assume you're also part of policymakers within the region.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I think that's a good question. But first, I'd have to say that I'd want to disagree with the committee on the area of subsidies, not particularly in energy. I think subsidies tend to cloud and to hide a lot of inefficiencies. I believe in efficiencies and innovation. We've done that with lighting, and it's the same principle that is applying now for heating, that it's just efficiency and improving that has made it possible, cheaper to use electricity to cook. And when it comes to communities, we already have that. The Constitution of Kenya requires that you be involved in how your resources, your natural resources, are managed. We have classified solar as part of the natural resources of every county. We have the county energy plans that, as of last month, every county is now required to submit to the national government their energy plans. And we have the integrated national energy planning system where both the private sector and civil society are involved in the development of energy plans. So I think how communities can be involved is, number one, there are things that are prerequisites that we should not even be discussing as a need, like water. Delivery of water should not be an option that you want water or not. Everybody needs and must have access to water. So that has an energy cost. Then there are things that are now optional depending on the county. If you are in a county that produces groundnuts and you can do value addition and you also have a geothermal source, how can you be able to link the two? Why not use the maximum in terms of the available energy resources and channel it to that? So the communities, people can express their interest in terms of what do you want for betterment of your life. Of course, people want jobs. Do we correlate the number of jobs that are created for every investment in 1 kilowatt? If you're doing it, I would say look at the impact it would have in rural communities just having laptops that use 65 watts for 8 hours a day. How much value addition can be created from that? ICT is Kenya's number one source of exports revenue in 2020. So it has overtaken tea. It's greater than horticulture. So we are missing out on a lot of areas of growing economically that is the root of 90% of our problems is just poverty. So if we can be able to say, can we point all these abundant source of energy towards production? What would be the impact of that? All these things that we're importing that are being manufactured using coal, we can make them. They are all produced using automated. Today, I tell people it is easier to run a factory than to drive a car. So we can be able to do the production here. We can be able to add value. We can be able to create, get markets, and improve livelihoods. So I see the role of people is in being able to articulate, and then the role of the experts is being able to translate those needs into an efficient way to deliver that same resource instead of losing it through high inefficiency in planning. So I see that the local community, and I see also the question of the role of the international community in renewable energy. I meet with people from all over the world every day interested in this. Number one, is that their mitigation can be done by producing in Africa. Put it as simple as that. So they need to invest not just in energy, but in production. They need to open up their markets. Instead of looking at loss and damage, open up your markets. Let us produce, whether it is paper clips or anything that we can produce using solar in Africa, that should be on top of their list. If they did that, we would solve half most of our problems. The investment would be easier because they are the same off takers. So there's no question about risk. It's just about meeting the technical standards, which we can do. We can be able to train people and we can be able to achieve that. So I think this is a topic that is very dear to me. I could go on forever, but we have to, every good thing has to come. I think that would be my parting shot for now.
Most definitely. I would like you just to finish on the last one. What role do you see international community playing in supporting renewable energy development in Africa, even considering that there's been a conversation around racial bias and investment
Yeah,
and sustainability? What can you
yeah.
say even as you wrap up?
So I say that the investments need to flow. We've already given the figure in from the Paris Agreement. Kenya alone, for its National Adaptation and Mitigation Action Plan, needs $113 billion every year for the next 10 years. So we want to see that investment. We want to see that real investment. And on our part, the opportunity is let's make a business case out of this. Then the investment will flow. But if we are going to also look at it in terms of the business case, let them also open up their markets and let us give a closed loop that involves investing in renewable energy, not to produce electrons, but to produce goods and services that they can consume. And in their consumption and in our production, then we meet halfway. Everybody benefits from that. So I say their investment, let it come with opening up of markets. So that is how I would see the international community as coming in to invest in Africa's renewable energy.
Okay, thank you so much. I can excuse you even as we continue with Geoffrey. Thank you so
Yes,
much.
thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this was Andrew Amadi, CEO, Kenya Renewable Energy Association, Career, and we are thankful that he joined us. As I continue with you, Kimiti, I know, unfortunately, Andrew has already stepped out, but might you have had any response to him?
Absolutely. Well, subsidies have their issues, so it's a big subject. It's a massive subject to discuss. But I would say that to a large extent, I think there may be need for subsidies. Or yes, I agree. Innovation is one of the ways that you can bring down the cost, of a lot of things. And just to add that I believe that even with the problem of power increment, that everybody is afraid of the cost of power going up. I think that people need to be a bit more innovative, and you will have your bill probably stay at the same level. I know that yeah, we also working with Kenya Power to educate people around things like electric cooking and how they could benefit from that. So if you come from Nakuru County over the next 3 months, April, May, June, July, you may benefit from electric cooking. Uh, uh, Courtesy of our partnership with Kenya Power, and devices where you can be able to actually access cooking equipment, efficient cooking equipment on credit. So that could be, the innovation that helps you to keep your energy costs down. If you can shift your, 70, 80 shillings per day of cooking costs to, 40 shillings of electricity per day, you save 50% of your energy costs. So that is really going to be important in driving down the cost of energy for households. So people need to be innovative, and I agree with Andy. We need to really drive innovation. As I said, on the off-grid side, people really think hard about innovation. You can't imagine what kind of things are powered with very little electricity. Right now, there's an off-grid maize meal that is, I mean, it's ridiculously way more efficient than your traditional maize milling equipment. Can run on a 1 kilowatt, solar system. I mean, it's amazing. So I believe that people need to innovate, and innovation is very important. But the subsidy discussions can be had at a at a larger scale, because there's probably, it's how the subsidies are targeted. Maybe that could be the issue in terms of distorting market prices. So subsidies can go towards, more businesses than the cost at the end, to drive access. So yeah, so it's all about how they are targeted as well. That could affect how the market responds to them. But it was a good point. It's
Brilliant.
something
It's
that
good
should
you
always
actually
be
mentioned.
discussed. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, so it's a valid point. There are places where subsidies have been utilized badly, and they have had devastating effects on economies at large. Yeah.
Okay. Good to note. Actually, you've talked about innovation. Um, how what is the cost of acquisition? Is it and just using the example of what you've given, the maize meal, you might, as a citizen, as a normal business person, are you actually able to purchase this?
Yes. I the last time I checked, the maize meals were not more than, they could be around 100,000 bob or something. But that includes solar. But if you bought a maize mill that doesn't have the solar system and you're using it on Kenya Power, it's way more efficient. I mean, that is information that I could provide to the participants. If you need, I can provide a link or something to the company. But they have,
Yes, please.
so there's a lot of innovation out there that can be utilized to bring down the cost of energy, for very many applications. And the reason is, for the off-grid market, people really have to think about efficiency, because you're investing not just in the energy system, in the equipment, but also in the energy systems. So you have to think of, how do you get the smallest energy system to give you the highest level of productivity. So those efficient, appliances and equipment that have been built in the off-grid, for the off-grid market, need to be brought to the grid, for people to be able to adopt, as well.
Brilliant. And you've talked about innovation again, just dwelling on that. How do you envision renewable energy evolving in Africa over the next few decades? And what impact do you think it will have on the continent's development trajectory?
Well, in terms of impact, definitely, there's a lot of jobs that are going to be created because of access to energy. There's a lot of income that people are going to be able to generate. So I see energy as a key driver in terms of creating employment, creating decent jobs, uh, because once energy is available, people are able to use computers, people are able to use, equipment. Value addition is possible. So from my experience, even irrigation, becomes possible, where it wasn't, because of access to energy. So I think it will transform agriculture, it will transform livelihoods, and yeah, I'm hoping that at the end of the day, lots of jobs will be created, because we have a youth bulge in Africa, and our young people need, good jobs.
Good, good one. How kindly give us your last words, even as we get to the end of this session. Just talking about renewable energy in Kenya and in Africa as a whole.
Yeah, what I'd say is, it is really important to, I'm not sure whether I'm speaking to policymakers or, yeah, but from an individual point of view, I'd say that it's very important to educate yourself around renewables, especially solar, because it's what a lot of people tend to interact with, tend to buy. So please educate yourself about the quality of the equipment you're buying. Make sure you know what the standards are, at least when you're buying something, so that you don't get poor quality products. And the other thing is, just understanding how solar works. It's not super complex. I think there are just certain things about solar that can be understood quite easily by people who have a certain level of literacy. So I think it's important that people educate themselves about renewable energy as much as possible, because only then will they be able to adopt it, but also they'll be able to adopt what is appropriate. So in many cases, you find people saying, "I got a solar system, it doesn't work," but it's because you didn't have any knowledge about what you require, and so maybe a quack or somebody who wanted to just make money with you give you something that doesn't, and they knew definitely probably this will work. And yeah, so I would urge people to educate themselves, seek to work with qualified people. There's a whole list of companies that are allowed to provide solar services. There's a whole list of technicians that are always on the EPRA website that are qualified to provide solar works. So there's a lot of things that people need to educate themselves about, so that when they're interacting with renewables, they get the right quality, they get the right workmanship, and so that when they adopt renewables, they don't have regrets about them. But I'd say that it's a huge opportunity to be energy independent that we have as a country, because we have immense geothermal potential, we have solar, we have wind, we have hydro. So we have a diversity, and I think energy diversity is great for energy security. So I think even as individuals, why not diversify, have a backup system in case you have issues of intermittency, and so you can be able to address your own issues around energy, reliability or cost with efficiency.
Thank you so much for that, committee. Ladies and gentlemen, we come to the end of our show today. Thank you so much. Today we had Andrew Amadi, CEO of Kerea, and Geoffrey Kimiti, the executive chair and co-founder at GIVE Limited. Thank you so much for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Let's Create Africa with your host truly, Wahiga K. Muturi, where we talk about business innovation, governance, and the SDGs. Thank you so much. Again, many thanks to Startinev, our major partner and innovation ecosystem partner. Know Your Rights Africa, which is a civic and citizen education platform. Soko, which is an social e-commerce platform. And last but not least, the Future of Work, who have been here to help us explore opportunities for job creation. Without further ado, this brings us to the end of our session. And I say thank you once again. My name is Wahiga K. Muturi, your host for Let's Create Africa. Have a good evening and God bless.